Hi, I'm Milena, booktuber, bookstore owner, classics lover, and I'm so happy you're here. The title of this video is technically not true because I've not read 13 books in 1 week, but since uploading my last weekly update, I have finished 13 books. I took most of July off of social media, most of my work. Running a small business, you cannot just take a month off. I did the only actual necessary things like answering customer emails and shipping orders. Usually I do way more, and this week I am back at work. It's nice to be back at it, but it was also really nice to have so much time to read. So I did finish quite a lot of books. I think I read 16 books in July, and a lot of those books are romance because July was a very difficult month for me in my personal life. Romance novels are such a great way to escape from whatever is going on, so I will talk to you about all the romance binging I did in the second half of this video, because I know some of you are here for the other genres. If you want romance recommendations, I definitely have a few good ones at the end of this video. Talk about the books I read for the Buzzwordathon, because both of them I really enjoyed. I am starting with a book that a lot of you told me I would really like, and that is Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. This is a historical fiction with the main character George Sand, who was a French author. There is a book on my TBR that is, I think, the diary of George Sand when Chopin, the pianist, and her children went to Mallorca for mainly Chopin's health, I think, but George Sand wanted to escape the bustle of Paris. Thought I would get a history of that adventure, but this is from the perspective of a teenage ghost. Follow this teenage ghost as she has haunted the place where George Sand and Chopin go to on holiday or just to stay for a while. And then we also follow her flashbacks of her life, which of course included a mystery because she's a teenage ghost. Need I say more? I don't usually go for mysteries, but this was really interesting. I really liked it. I got really attached to the strangeness and the funness of this ghost. It doesn't take very long for the ghost to fall in love with George. One of the first scenes is George and Chopin kissing up against the house, and the teenage ghost just being absolutely enraptured by both of them. George Sand, often dressed like a man, and this teenage ghost thinks she sees two men kissing, and then she gets more and more fascinated by George. It's always risky if you have these historical figures to see if you can bring them to life really well, and I can't say that I know Chopin or George Sand particularly well. Nell Stevens always does such a good job. She did a great job with not George Eliot. Elizabeth Gaskell as well, I think, is like a specific talent of this author because it was so convincing. While it did take me a while to really get into this book, to feel really hooked, the beauty of the gothic in this book and the island are really very intriguing, and I think a general classics lover will really enjoy this book. Then 5 stars is a poetry collection by Jen Campbell, which I also used for the Buzzwordathon. Please do not touch this exhibit. This has a lot of different themes, but I think if you know Jen Campbell, her booktube channel, then those themes are something you would already connect together, knowing her. It is about disability and Jen's childhood, which I found so strongly done because there are a few, I would say, is it mixed media? But like, this is a poem, and then here we see a few letters that her doctors wrote to each other about her treatment. Of course, difficult to read because you know, like, what a child goes through is really difficult, but it's also the way they talk about her as if she is not quite human. The ethics of doctors can be a bit difficult when they get excited about something that causes a lot of pain and suffering for a patient, but because it's their field of work and interest, they get excited because they've never seen it before, but then that excitement feels unethical. In what way does it leave space for her humanity as a child? Which I think was most interesting. I found the most interesting theme, I think, in this collection. It's also about IVF. It is about being a disabled adult wanting IVF. About fairy tales as well. It's woven in, like fairy tales and myth is woven in within these themes. Everything you can kind of expect from Jen Campbell. Overall, I thought this was very well written. Everything worked together really well. The themes were built up in a good way, and I think the different elements of the letters and the poems and how this was all built, it just worked perfectly, and I cannot give this anything else than a 5 star. You will see in the other books I'm discussing that I am in my new releases era, which I didn't really see coming, to be honest, but I'm just getting really excited by a lot of new releases, and I do think that Libro FM and the early listening copies for influencers is really helping because I get such a clear overview of some like hype books, some new authors that are debuting their works, especially when it comes to romance, but we'll talk about that later. Another newer release, I think this is 2025, is this graphic novel by one of my favorite graphic novelists. For this graphic novel though, she only did the illustration and someone else wrote it. This was written by Janine Barkus and Isabel Greenberg did the illustrations. She also did a Isabel Greenberg also made a graphic novel that she also wrote about the Brontes, which I think to date is my favorite graphic novel. This is basically a mini biography or just snippets from Jane Austen's life told in a graphic novel. They did explain it, but they chose to only use yellow and blue, which I think really works. I think it works really well with the art style, but also with the historical period. There's a little bit of red when Jane Austen thinks about the novel she's going to write based on the events that she sees. I really enjoyed that part. The art I absolutely love. But one thing I didn't necessarily love about this was the writing. The writing felt very non-fiction, where the dialogue was used to cram in a lot of information. Well, you know that thing, especially in historical fiction, when there's dialogue, two characters are talking to each other and they're explaining things to each other that the other would already know, or that you would never naturally bring up in a dialogue. The author wanted the reader to have that information. It didn't feel very natural. That is the reason this graphic novel was kind of a snippets reading experience for me. Usually a graphic novel I sit and I read, but the writing felt a little bit stiff in this book. So for that, I think I'm gonna give it a 4-star, but I still think it's worth getting if you're such a big Jane Austen fan as I am. In my July TBR or June TBR? No, I think it was my July TBR. I mentioned the European Literature Prize, and there were 4 books on there. One book, one of you told me, was quite male few, so I scratched that off the list. No one has time for that. Another book I decided to delay because thematically it was a little bit too close to what was happening in my personal life. One book I still want to read for Women in Translation Month, and then the book that I did actually listen to is Clear by Carice Davis. This is a historical fiction about a man who lives on a Scottish island all by himself. He used to live there with his family, but he's completely isolated from the rest of the world. He speaks his own language that is neither like Gaelic or English or Norwegian. I think it's a little bit in between of everything. And then we have an impoverished minister and his wife. The minister decides to take a job where he needs to find this man and just clear the island to make sure that everyone who lives there leaves, because the government wants to own the island. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to that because I care most about the characters. When he comes to that island, he has a fall, I believe, and the man on the island starts to take care of him. Things that don't usually happen in these kind of historical tales do happen. This book was surprising, beautifully written. I loved the ending, even though it felt a little bit abrupt, since it is it's somewhere in between a novella and a novel, but it read like a slow novella to me. I think it's very acceptable the way it ended, even though I wanted more and more chapters. I wanted this to be a novel. I don't like saying that about a novella because it's allowed to exist in its own. This was the kind of thing where I liked the ending so much that I wanted to see how the characters would develop more in that ending. And I think that is also kind of great about a novella, that you can just imagine what would happen and that you can give your own interpretation to a certain ending. I really like the character. So we also have the minister's wife, Mary, she was called, I believe. She is a very interesting character as well, especially how she is described in some things that have happened or some things that she experienced before she got married. Very unglamorous. All these characters are incredibly unglamorous, not beautiful in the way that they're described in a book, and I really enjoyed that. I highly recommend that, and I get why so many people really enjoyed it. One of my most anticipated releases, I don't know if it's a disappointment, I still don't know how to properly talk about this book, but that is Human Rights by Juno Dawson. This is the third book in a trilogy. We had to wait for this for 2 years, which was fine. This is set in our current day, and in the first book we are introduced to 4 witches who have been friends since childhood, but they have kind of drifted apart, and we follow them throughout 3 books. This, like, I think the series in general, but especially this book, the plot is so wild and adventurous and daring, and I did really like that, but it's also all the soap opera tropes you can think of, especially in this book. And somehow I felt like, is it too far-fetched? Is it doing too much? Or am I okay with the wildness and the adventure? I went a little bit back and forth with that. Having said that, book 1 and 2 I listened to an audio. I also wanted to listen to the audiobook of this one, but the audiobook doesn't come out like a month and a half after its release date. Like, logistically happens sometimes. From an accessibility point of view, I dislike it a little bit. So I decided to read the physical, and maybe it's just that I didn't like the writing as much in the physical copy as I did while listening to it, because it's very bantery and it's very cool girl UK language, and I didn't feel like it fitted with all the characters in the same way, because all the characters make the same kind of jokes and the same kind of sarcasm, banter and pop culture references I can like. It felt like all the characters had the same tone in doing so, and that doesn't really fit because it takes away from your focus in the first place, but it also takes away from the individuality of the characters, and that kind of really bothered me in this book, especially because it felt a bit messy. Yeah, I think I got taken out of the story a little bit because that was so heavy for me. I think I would have preferred more natural, fast-flowing writing. So while I have those two little critiques of this book, I just enjoy the characters so much and I needed their story to be wrapped up. I needed some answers on some characters because this series is known for its cliffhangers. Reading this series right now is good timing because you have all the books. I still gave this 4 stars because I just have such a love for this series. I liked this book the least of all of them. I have one fantasy romance kind of book, so I'll talk to you about that before we get into the romance section of this video. This was also an early copy. I listened to it a little bit early. This is a historical romance with a little bit of fantasy. This is The Nanny's Handbook for Magic and Managing Difficult Dukes. So it's a Victorian romance between an employer and an employee, the nanny, who is Emmeline, who just finished her very fancy nanny school, which gets a little bit of magic from the Fae to help with their nannying duties. And I love that their magic is specifically targeted towards their job. They can't do any random magic, but I think they have these magic pockets that just help clean things up and help locate children, and she can talk to animals as well. It's kind of Mary Poppins. The male main character is called Xavier. He is recently a duke and he is also a guardian for 3 orphans who are distant cousins of his, and he needs a nanny for them to take care of course. So Xavier also is building this clock and he is being disturbed by unknown forces. This book has a bit of a mystery element as well. I did not have high expectations for this book. I did not think I would like it. The whole employer-employee dynamic usually makes me so uncomfortable because it's just not okay. Especially in the Victorian era where employee would have, or servant would have, so little power over what happened. But I really liked how aware these characters were of that, especially the Duke. I was so aware of his position and really held back for a long time. So this is definitely a very slow burn. But I think what's a bit different is that this Duke is very inexperienced when it comes to romance. Our main character, our nanny, she is in her mid-20s and she is a widow, so she's already been married, and I felt like that put them on a little bit more of equal ground. But then the charges, which is what they're called, the 3 children, they were so curious and intelligent, and I love them so much. It added so much to the story. Sometimes writers who don't write children's books aren't great at writing children, but this author was amazing at it. They were so charming. The relationship between them and the nanny was so charming and caring and loving. I almost want to say perfectly written, because between all the coziness and the loveliness, there was this really strong and also sexy romance at times, and it switched between those elements so perfectly. Alright, let's get into the romance portion of this video. Told you I did new releases these days because a book that just came out that I also got an early listening copy of, A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. I like this just as much as their first book. It's a cozy fantasy with a contemporary setting. It's a non-spicy romance and a found family. Children are again very much part of this world, just as in the first book. This book starts off with a teenage Sarah, and she is one of the most powerful witches in her community until she decides to use necromancy, which of course is forbidden and takes almost all of her magic. Because of that, she decides to run her parents' inn. That is somehow, with the bit of magic that she has left, there is a magical element to the inn, which kind of creates this opportunity for found family because people are drawn to the inn when they need it. And that is just, it's so magical and so lovely, and it creates a lot of characters who start out lonely but find a found family, a community, and it's so easy to fall in love with these characters. I think the relationship between these characters is one of the sweetest I've ever read. It's really, really nice and kind and a warm hug, and I want them in my own life. I want to know them. While the magic is high stakes, especially at certain points, it's the same kind of high stakes that a murder is in a cozy mystery. Like, it's there, but it doesn't take over, and it is in service of the characters having their character development. I feel hesitant even calling this a romance novel, so maybe it doesn't belong in the romance section, because the romance is part of it. I think it does drive the plot forward, definitely for those 2 characters, but there's no spice in this book. It's definitely not the only genre I would pinpoint this as. Overall, I gave this 4 stars because I really liked it, but I do think it's slightly forgettable. I don't know if I can review this. This would end up like in my honorable mentions at the end of the year, so that's why I have my notes. And when I really didn't know what to do with of myself, I binged 3 romance novellas because honestly you listen to them in a day and you just kind of forget about everything that's going on, which is so nice. First off, one book that I felt like, am I going to review this on my channel because it's a little bit of characters, a little bit of plot, and a lot of smut. I'm not gonna recommend this, I'm just gonna say what I thought about it. Alright, this is Silver Fox by Gaylac Rose, a 2024 release. It's an age gap, insta-love, forced proximity kind of book. We follow a 30-year-old main character and her dad's best friend, who's quite a bit younger than her dad, which was helpful. He is in his early 40s. Dad accidentally both told them, you can go to my vacation house to rest for the weekend. And of course, they meet there and it gets really spicy really soon, and it was really fun and really dumb. It was a good time, but also like kind of, oh my gosh. So if you want to give that a go, it's gonna be fun. I gave it 3 stars. I would like to read a full-length novel by this author that is not necessarily like a spicy novella, because I do really like the sounds of her plots. So I might give one of her full novels a go. One of my favorite romance authors who have not been the Brown Sisters series. I don't think they have published anything else. So this was a 2020 release, Discarding Temptation by Talia Hibbert. This is a friends to lovers, brother, best friend kind of romance, which are buzzwords that I would go for a little bit sooner than the previous ones. It has some serious themes. The main character gets threats to her life. The brother's best friend has promised to take care of her while the brother isn't there. So he says, okay, you can stay with me, you can sleep in my bed, I'll sleep on the sofa. Forced proximity, things happen. I think the build-up of this novella was just perfection, because they're already friends, but it's not like immediate attraction and immediate spice. It like really slowly built up with great banter. I do think the way it wrapped up, of course, was a bit too fast and a bit messy because it's a romance novella. Yeah, the banter and the build-up was great in this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. Novella I didn't really like, which I could have expected because I just don't like this author, and it is Two Can Play by Ellie Hazelwood. This is about 2 gamers who go on a retreat with their gaming companies. Their gaming companies need to work together. I just don't love Ellie Hazelwood. Well, I can see that the character work and the plot work's all great. Like objectively, she's a good writer. But then when it comes to her actual writing on the sentence level, especially in the spicy scenes, I just cannot. I get grossed out. It just is so not for me. And in this one as well, it was like, excuse me? And I am not a prude, because I read Silver Fox and just look up how many little spice ratings that has. But with Ellie Hazelwood, she just uses certain things continuously in her spice scenes, and I'm like, oh no. So yeah, well, I like enjoy like the general character work, especially the side characters, that was great. Just her books get ruined for me because of that. And I did read, oh gosh, a YA by Ellie Hazelwood, because I was like, okay, this doesn't have spice, but then the plot was bad. So unfortunately, Ellie Hazelwood just not for me. But because I can just see that it's quite solid, I still gave it a 3.5, because I think plot and character-wise, this is the best novella of the 3. Romance, whether or not you like an author, is one of the most important things for me. Having said that, I have read 3 books by Olivia Dade. She had a new release coming that is, once I'm filming this, it's not even out yet, and I got an early copy through Libro FM. So on the 1st of every month I'm like scrolling on Libro FM looking for my anticipated releases, and I had a little squeal when I saw Olivia Dade in between there, because I wasn't expecting it and I was so excited, and I of course listened to it right away. I will talk to you about that in a minute, but first I read some of Olivia Dade's backlist and I don't regret it at all. Somehow I decided to read the 3rd in a series, which is, I think, to date still my favorite Olivia Dade. I read that because I like the sound of the plot and the tropes so much, and I think it's still just most for me, and I think it's a bit of a unique opinion. I don't think people generally like the last one. So the first one is spoiler alert, and that is kind of what made Olivia Dade for the bigger public. I don't know if it's also the book that was traditionally published for the first time. Ooh, I'm kind of curious. I should look that up. Spoiler alert is between 2 characters who have met on a fan fiction writing site, and they've been friends for 2 years, but it's kind of clear that both of them have grown feelings for each other, even though they don't know any details about each other's personal life, or they haven't seen a photo of each other either, but they know like the basics of each other, and they know that they are attracted to each other. This series is set in a world with actors that are of a Game of Thrones like series. It's very heavily inspired on Game of Thrones, but one of these writers, or one of these friends on the fan fiction site, is actually an actor on the show who isn't very happy with what they're writing on the show and he is so passionate about the lore behind the show that he started writing fanfiction. So while they don't know it, they go on a date as themselves. I really adored the fanfiction bit. It's like sometimes a page where we read a little bit of their fanfiction, but not the whole thing, which I really enjoy because I'm invested in the characters and not in that TV show, the fictional TV show. So it's really fun and a great way to kind of get to know the characters. I was glad it wasn't too much. While this book definitely has some known tropes, fanfiction bit did give like a bit of a unique twist to the book, which I think was also why it was so popular when it came out. But I'll have to say there was of course also a plot outside of the fanfiction and celebrity bit. April has some family issues, which I found a little bit boring, a little bit unnecessary. Wasn't interested in that at all, to be honest. So yeah, I really like the world, but spoiler alert, the first book is my least favorite in the whole series because I also felt like the ending was a bit rushed and a bit messy. It just didn't come together very well. So I gave this a 3.5. And then book 2, love. Book 2 is all the feels. Follow the best friend of another actor of that Game of Thrones like series, and he is best friend with the dude from book 1. He is so extroverted and he says that he has ADHD and he is just so bright and social and very careless as well. And because he is so careless, especially when it comes to publicity, the producers of the Game of Thrones live show decide to give him someone to go with him when he goes to interviews or public events or whatever. She's basically with him all the time. And then we are introduced to our female main character and they build such an amazing friendship with a lot of great banter. It's a reversed Grumpy Sunshine. I didn't know I liked it that much. There's an Emily Henry that also has a reversed Grumpy Sunshine, and that is my favorite Emily Henry too. And all the feels had just such great characters. So the female main character is called Lauren. She's very calm, quiet, and doesn't really put her own needs first. And of course, because Alex is so impulsive, it takes him a while to notice that. And he tries to really get a reaction out of her with a lot of things that he does. And the banter between that is just so funny and lovely to read. Another unique thing I think about this book is that them falling in love has nothing to do with their appearance, which I do think is quite unique for a romance. They really fall in love as friends and with each other's personality. I know that some people find that there are a bit of issues with the fact that Lauren is often described as not really pretty or beautiful, even by Alex, even though he is so incredibly in love with her and also attracted to her. Also important to know that Olivia Dade always writes characters in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, which always gives such a different feel to where the characters are when they meet. Yeah, all the feels. If you're gonna read a Olivia Dade, go for all the feels, but do give it a chance when it comes to the way that Lauren is described, and know that it's from a place of love and kindness and respect, and that it's not dismissive towards Lauren, which I think not everyone really understands, and maybe you only really understand it if you know Olivia Dade as an author. Oh, and I feel like, again, with all the feels, like the family drama just didn't really do it for me, and I think that's also something I said about the final book. But yeah, this was a 4-star for me. Finally, a new release by Olivia Dade, a book that will come out, I think, August 8th. I don't know, maybe I will upload this before or after that. I don't know. Is their first paranormal romance. This is a Walking Dead kind of place, kind of situation, and we have two neighbors, one of whom is a vampire and the other is a human. Our human is a soap maker and she lost both her parents during the first zombie attack. And I think it's now 2 decades where zombies are contained and there are supernaturals in this world. So it's like The Walking Dead with werewolves and vampires. The neighbor is a vampire, but he is, and I found it so funny, and his name is Gaston. Of course, we get to make a little bit of fun of the fact that his name is Gaston, which he doesn't go by the way, since the Beauty and the Beast film. He does have the vanity of Gaston without any of his bad qualities, which I really love that Olivia Dade decided to keep that and to have a male character that is interested in beautiful design and beautiful fabrics and in makeup and everything without that saying anything of his sexuality, although this character is pansexual. In this world, it says all vampires are pansexual. I don't know if you should use that, like that a species and a sexuality, that there's no diversity within that, but I don't know if I'm the right person to judge on that. I just finished this book like an hour ago, and I think it's a little bit too plot driven for me, because both the characters come together because there is a new zombie outbreak, but somehow the government isn't reporting it and they are trying to warn people. So it's very plot based, and I didn't love that. I really loved how the characters came together though. I think the female main character didn't really get her development. Discussing discussing a trauma from her past is not like character development. We need a little bit more. Felt like Gaston was really funny, and the audiobook narrator gave him a French accent because he is originally French. I did really like that. I think she did a great job. Usually it would be so icky. I actually thought the narrator did a great job at making him very sexy in French. Again, the romantic scenes, the spice, I think Olivia Day does a great job at that. Is it a little bit over the top? Yes. Were there some vampiric things that I absolutely did not want in this book? Yes, but it was still somehow acceptable. This is not, I think, one of Olivia Day's strongest books, and it's gonna be a series because we ended on a hint towards book 2, and I'm not as excited as I would be with Olivia Day's contemporary romances. We will get a new one in November, which I'm way more excited about. This had a few cute side characters, but only in the latter half of the book, and I would have enjoyed this more, I think, if both of the characters were less isolated and more part of a community, which I think Olivia Day does so well. Gave this a 3.5 star. And I think I have now talked about all of the books that I read. I'm currently reading, or I started reading, the new Ocean Vuong book again, a new release for the Paws and Pages book club. We will have our live show on Sunday, so if you would like to join that, we would love to have you. Oh, great news. Do you remember The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hatlow? Janice Hatlow wrote a new historical fiction, and I just got access to it through Libor FM. So that's gonna be my next audiobook, and I will hopefully review that for you next week. For now, I hope that you have a lovely day or evening, and I hope to see you in another video. Doei!